Former President Trump making an unexpected detour from the campaign trail. Trump in a Washington, D.C. courtroom today for a voluntary appearance as judges weighed his presidential immunity argument in the 2020 election case. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports from the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C.
Former President Trump and special counsel Jack Smith are both eager to get answers in this federal 2020 election case. They want a court to rule as to the question as to whether or not the former president is immune from prosecution in this case. Trump appeared here at this federal courthouse here in Washington, D.C. earlier this morning without being required to do so. And this is interesting timing for the former president. It comes when all of his GOP challengers are currently making their last rounds in the state of Iowa to secure last-minute support there. But his appearance here in D.C. instead shows that his campaign team sees this as an opportunity to shore up more support for the former president by painting him as a victim of a politicized justice system. The former president, after leaving this courtroom today, expressed optimism in the case and doubled down on his claim of innocence. And in a rare moment, he showed gratitude to the media for covering his case fairly. Watch this.
I want to thank everybody for the fairness. We've been covered very fairly. A president has to have immunity. And the other thing is I did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong.
Trump's legal team argued before 3 judges today that Trump's actions after the 2020 election fell within his official duties as president and served within the national interest. Therefore, they cannot be prosecuted. However, prosecutors argue that his actions were unprecedented and have no legal protection. Here's a bit of that back and forth.
Never before has there been allegations that a sitting president has, with private individuals and using the levers of power, sought to fundamentally subvert the democratic republic and the electoral system.
What he is forecasting is a situation where the floodgates will be opened. We are in a situation where we have the prosecution of the chief political opponent who's winning in every poll.
Now, as we await a decision here, it's important to note that whichever way the court rules, this case is still very likely to end up at the Supreme Court. And while Trump's trial was scheduled for March, this appeals process could delay it past that date and possibly beyond the 2024 presidential election. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And counting down to the 2024 presidential election, former President Trump is still facing multiple legal battles. To discuss the ramifications of the latest court battle in his 2020 election case, we have senior Trump advisor Kash Patel. Kash Patel, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Steve, it's great to be back with you in the new year.
Great to have you, Kash. And, you know, reports are coming out today from Trump's appeal to the D.C. appellate court over the former president's claims of presidential immunity. The judges reportedly expressing skepticism over Trump's argument. How do you view this from a legal standpoint?
This is an oral argument forum where they are allowed to publicly view the docket and examine the petitioner's request, and that's what they've done here. And irrespective of what the ruling is, I firmly believe, and I've always said that President Trump, as has every president for 250 years, enjoys presidential immunity. But the district court case is on hold right now, and a number of things could happen. The appellate court could issue no decision. They could get sent back to the district court for clarification. President Trump could appeal the entire decision to the entire Circuit Court of Appeals for D.C. That is every single appellate judge. That's his right. And of course, then there's the Supreme Court. So this case is not going to be adjudicated fully anytime in the near future. And I think Jack Smith has overplayed his hand by demanding that the Supreme Court get involved preemptively because he wants to rush this adjudication so that they can have their conviction in the court of law to carry out in the media. And I think that is the ultimate weaponization of justice. And I think Donald Trump will prevail ultimately.
It's really fascinating, Kash, that this could see multiple rounds of judges hearing this case. So what do you think will come out in the process? And also with the U.S. Supreme Court scheduled to hear the case on February 18th, what is your prediction for their ruling on the Colorado court's order barring President Trump from the 2024 presidential ballot?
Well, taking those in reverse, it's important to remember President Trump is on the Colorado ballot as we speak. That decision can only be nullified if the U.S. Supreme Court comes in and says that the Colorado Supreme Court adjudicated the matter correctly by deciding, quote unquote, Donald Trump committed insurrection. I don't believe the Supreme Court's going to touch that because the Constitution and the federal law are abundantly clear. The state courts have no authority to utilize the 14th Amendment and proscribe the president's activities in and around what is up at issue here. And so I think you're going to see a swift sort of non-decision almost that keeps President Trump on the ballot there. And as to the legal gymnastics that unfold in Washington, D.C. on this appellate process, your guess is as best as mine. Exactly how it comes out in the interim, no one knows. The only thing that matters is the decision of the United States Supreme Court on presidential immunity. And the thing that everybody should be asking themselves is, do they want this unconstitutional decision to be applied retroactively to every president?
Cash, the DOJ plans to make 1,000 more arrests related to the January 6th riots. This, mind you, in an election year. Do you believe that this is ultimately an attempt to intimidate the former president in his campaign and his supporters before the primaries? And is this escalation linked to the Supreme Court's possible denial of the immediate review of Trump's immunity claim?
Look, this is one of those days where I'm just ashamed to have been a part of the Department of Justice, when they have so weaponized justice and they have so lied to the American people by going out there and having the Attorney General say, we don't interfere with election year politics. But then they come out and say a coordinated strike is happening to take on thousands of free speech protesters who protested their free speech right to contest an election. And now you have the DOJ, and mind you, there are no coincidences in government, coming out and making a grandiose statement about prosecuting people who are just present. I mean, putting aside the fact that they have trampled on the First Amendment rights of so many January 6 detainees already, now they're going to double down and do it again. That is the actual threat to democracy, and it should show American citizens the total weaponization and the level that this FBI and DOJ are willing to go to remove your right to vote on election day and tamp out the vote before it even happens. And to me, that's the greatest threat to democracy. And Donald Trump is the one leading the charge exposing this corruption.
How do you respond to former Attorney General Bill Barr's critique of the Biden Justice Department's prosecution of these individuals tied to January 6th? A vocal critic of former President Trump and his former boss, mind you.
Well, look, it's pretty simple. Every attorney general, everybody who's ever in law enforcement should be saying the same thing. The Justice Department should never be utilized to interfere with the political election process of this country. And that's exactly what's happening here. The FBI lied to us and said there was no FBI involvement on January 6th. Now we find out there were so many FBI assets and informants there that the FBI doesn't know how many there were. We cannot rely upon that institution to adjudicate the matters of January 6th fairly when they have been lying to us from jump and utilizing the media to corruptly put out a disinformation campaign against a political opponent they don't like. Our law enforcement system must be upheld by every person in law enforcement, former AGs and otherwise.
You raised some very important questions and points. Kash Patel, thank you.
Hey, thanks. Have a great day.
The mystery illness that kept Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin out of the loop this week has been revealed. It turns out to be prostate cancer. The Pentagon spokesperson today saying that Austin is recovering and in good spirits.
I can tell you that he is actively engaged in his duties, as I highlighted, and fully engaged. And so, completely confident in that. And we'll obviously keep you updated in terms of his status in the hospital.
According to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the Secretary's cancer was discovered in early December, and he underwent surgery later that month. Then on New Year's Day, Austin was once again admitted due to a urinary tract infection, which was a complication of the surgery. The Pentagon did not inform the public about the diagnosis, not even President Biden or his cabinet members. Until this morning, the lack of transparency has fueled criticism among members of Congress, some of whom have called for Austin to step down, this prompting a review inside of the Pentagon. Extreme temperatures and snowstorms attempting to derail GOP candidates' campaign plans in the state of Iowa, and new polls showing contrasting depictions of the race in New Hampshire. Joining us live now from Iowa is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening to you, Iris. First of all, what is the situation right now in Iowa, and how could it impact caucus night?
Good evening to you, Steve. So in the past 24 hours here, we got about 9 to 11 inches of snow in Des Moines. It's not only making traveling difficult for us who got stuck in the snowstorm late last night, but also is impacting presidential candidates in the Republican Party who are right now campaigning in Iowa just a week before the Iowa caucus next Monday. Former President Trump's campaign had to cancel several events by his surrogates, including one scheduled for tonight featuring former U.S. Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. It was canceled just earlier today. Meanwhile, Vivek Ramaswamy also had to cancel 3 of his 7 campaign events scheduled for today, and that's after he criticized Nikki Haley for doing the same thing yesterday morning for canceling one of her events. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, is still scheduled to participate at a Fox News town hall here in Des Moines later tonight, and that's before he participates in a debate with Nikki Haley tomorrow night here in Iowa. And of course, it's not actually the worst just yet. Temperatures will plunge starting this Saturday, and on Monday, caucus day is going to plunge below 0 degrees. It might actually become the coldest caucus night ever since 1972, which is when the modern nominating system first began. And while all the presidential candidates, including Trump, Ramaswamy, and DeSantis, are all boasting that their supporters are loyal and motivated enough to still come out to vote for them despite the extreme temperatures here, it does remain to be seen how the turnout will actually turn out to be here at the first caucus nationwide in 2024. Steve.
We can certainly see right now, Iris, how the elements are taking your breath away. We might get a sense of that at Trump's 4 rallies in Iowa this weekend amid the frigid temperatures even further. Now turning our eyes to New Hampshire, however, where the primary will take place in just 2 weeks, right after the Iowa caucus. What are the polls showing us there?
Right, Steve. So in New Hampshire, 2 new polls are showing 2 very different pictures about the race there, especially when it comes to Trump versus Nikki Haley. A new poll released this morning by CNN and the University of New Hampshire shows that Trump is leading Nikki Haley only by 7 points, and that's down from a 22-point lead back in November. Meanwhile, another poll also released today by the Boston Globe shows that Trump is leading Nikki Haley by 20 points. So 2 very different pictures painted here by the new polls. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley says that she's excited about a new polling showing that she's catching up with Trump. But Trump has been telling us in the past weekend, for example, at the rally here in Iowa, that he doesn't believe that Haley is actually surging. He's pointing to media reports that are only focused on Haley gaining just a few points, but not acknowledging Trump's wide lead in the polls. So Trump's been dismissing Haley's quote-unquote surge in the polls, but let's see what happens when it gets closer to the New Hampshire primary, which is coming up very soon. Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao braving the elements as she tracks the candidates throughout Iowa for us with that live report. Thank you, Iris. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.